So excited to have you all join us today. Um, so let's see, Claire, do you want to get us going or go?
Yes, just getting everything jumping in here quickly. All right. Yes, thank you all so much for joining us today. Super, super excited, especially to hear our very own Jonathan talk about his work. But before we kick things off, I just want to go ahead and go through our virtual land acknowledgement that we have. At SAI, we acknowledge that we live, work, and learn on the traditional lands of many tribes of Indigenous peoples across North America. We acknowledge the past, present, and future human impact of our communities on Indigenous ways of life in the land that we inhabit. We honor with gratitude the land itself as a living entity that supports countless interconnected beings and the ongoing connection of Indigenous peoples to these water, lands, plants, and animals. As we continue to gather virtually from across the country, we encourage you to learn more about the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded and continue to steward the land that you inhabit. And as you continue to seek ways to honor and cultivate meaningful relationships with Indigenous peoples, non-human animals, the land, and water. With that, I would like to turn things over. I'm actually going to turn them back to Fanuel because he's going to, as we have our new initiative that we started with the STEM Advocacy Institute. And Fanuel is going to give a little update on the project that he's been working on recently. So Fanuel, the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you, Claire. So I will do a quick spiel of just about my lab and a quick update, and then introduce Dr. Wisco, who will take us through his work that he's been developing. So I am the chief resident here at SAI, and it's been wonderful to develop SAI along with the wonderful team of people over the years. And I've also been super excited to build this lab, the M Lab, as we call it. So what we do essentially is to look at the ecosystem of informal STEM learning, which we are all a part of. And for me, I'm really, really interested in looking at the connections between the different entities in this huge universe, I call it, okay? And so Dr. Wisco is part of this, and all the other residents and fellows are part of this ecosystem. And for me, it brings a lot of excitement to see the connections between all of us and what we do. And so what we do as well in the lab is to also engineer new tools and programs to support innovative exposure, training, career development, and so forth for the people that are in this ecosystem as well. So the way I think about my lab, we do research. And so I would encourage you to check out our work. We just published actually something very recently, looking at the informal STEM landscape from the point of view of the National Science Foundation and its awards. But you can look at other work that we publish in Nature and so forth. But also this leads up into tool development. So there are two here that I'm just showcasing, the Journal of Stories in Science. Check it out if you haven't, storiesinScience.org. And also what we're calling the Netflix, essentially for SciComm TV, that is quietly being developed there. But it's live, actually. You can check it out, scicommtv.org. And finally, of course, the two programs that I'm super excited about and launching, have been launched from the lab, the Fellows Program and the Internship Program, which continue to flourish. And for me, that brings, a lot of joy and excitement. And so do check us out. We continue to build the body of work. And the cool thing is that we're not alone. We're seeing, we have our colleagues, the Bankston Lab, that's also working at this from a policy angle, along with various other practitioners, and one of whom I want to introduce to you today, Dr. Wisco. And so I was looking through my emails, Dr. Wisco, about how we actually got in touch, and it was Dr. Pete Volbrecht. He was a culprit that got us connected with a simple email that said, the two of you should meet because you're in the same geographic area. We're in the Boston area. And so with that started this wonderful chain reaction of conversations and engagement, and it brought us here. And Dr. Wisco is a professor at BU. In addition to that, he's one of our senior residents here at SAI, and he's a co-founder of the Better Learning Experiences, which he will tell you about. So I'm going to refrain from telling you too much, all to say that he is doing so much. And one of the questions I always wonder is, how do we all, individuals like Dr. Wisco do this, right? You have all these different facets of life that you're doing all in one go. But of course, it takes time. It takes a lot of passion and sacrifice. I think I have to say that. And so, Dr. Wisco, thank you so much for taking the time, both joining us at SAI and today for this conversation that you'll lead us through. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to you, Dr. Wisco. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Manuel, and thank you, Claire, and thank you, Bree, for having me. It's great to see everybody else here. It's wonderful to be part of this group. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the land acknowledgement. That means I don't need to do it, so I appreciate it. And I would like everybody to know that my preferred pronouns are he, him, his, in case you were wondering. So, all right, so I'm going to share my screen and dive right into it. This is going to be a somewhat active presentation, so be ready to click on the presentation when I ask you to. And we have a few videos here and there. But for the most part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the philosophy of why we produced or established better learning experiences. And then I'm going to talk about the business model, which the reason why I'm going to talk about the business model, not the logic model, is because the entire presentation is the logic model. so hopefully you find that helpful. And then I'm sure we'll have some time for questions at the end. So you'll notice that the title that Manuel put up there, by the way, you can call me John for here, please do, was, we could all use better learning experiences. So I expanded that title to this, and I'd like you to keep this in mind. And if you agree or disagree with it, it's okay. Either way is fine, but I want to challenge this notion that our educational system is still functional. And I really believe that it begins with the effectiveness of teachers in setting up effective, engaged, and inclusive learning spaces. So that's why I titled this talk, Teachers Are Incredibly Efficient at Killing Learning. And that's why we could all use better learning experiences. So, all right, so the disclosure is that I'm the co-founder of Better Learning Experiences. So I just have this slide on here. Oh, and by the way, I was going to provide these slides to Fanuel for him to post later, because I have an appendix of some additional reading if anybody's interested in some of that content. All right, so we're going to talk about cameras and I Spy. We're going to talk about bicycles and course design, light bulbs and inclusivity, videos and brain activity, squishy things and service learning, opening up the universe, and then finally, we're going to talk about our business model. Okay, so it's not like I haven't been doing Zoom for 2 years. Here we go. Which one of these pictures is not like the other? So here is that first interactive moment. All right, here you go. Let's take a minute and just click on what picture you think is not like the other. And just to let you know, there's more than one right and more than one wrong answer. So we'll give it 30 more seconds. Are people able to click on the screen?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
This is because it's on your screen. I guess we don't have the active link, I guess. So.
Oh, okay. In that case, I will click. So I'll go over each one briefly then, and you'll notice that we have some students here in the upper left-hand corner with their hands up. We have some students up here in the upper right-hand corner, no hands up, but they are very much engaged into what they're doing. I'm going clockwise, by the way. In the middle right, we have a teacher that's engaging with some students and some other students in the background, kind of doing their own thing. In the lower right, we have a student here that doesn't look too happy. She's actually got her hands over her ears, but everyone else in the background seems to be doing okay, or we assume that. And then on the left here, we have this, what I will bias you, is this really cute picture of these kids who are having fun with this chemical experiment, which probably involves vinegar and baking soda at some level. So, okay, so I think most of you, as you looked at this image, probably were drawn to the one in the lower right, that this one looks different than the other. And it's probably because you were drawn to the fact that she doesn't look quite as happy as everyone else, right? And I would say that's correct, but I would also argue that every picture is not like the other for different reasons. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have an engaged classroom where a teacher is engaging them and students are free to raise their hands. In the upper right and the lower left, students are on their own and working either independently or together with the material. And then over on the far right, we actually finally see the teacher. This is the only picture that has the teacher. So what is going on with this girl in the lower right? She might actually be okay, right? She might be deep in thought. We don't know that, right? She might be totally miserable. She might feel excluded. She might actually feel like she wants to exclude everyone else because she's sensory overload. And the point of this picture is that it's important for teachers and peer learners to be in tune with what's going on around you in an inclusive and engaged learning space. And teachers who only pay attention to what is on the upper left is the right scenario, or what is on the middle right is the right scenario, quote unquote, right, are completely missing something else. And that really is that how student-centric is your classroom. So let's take a look at the next image. Okay, so which one of these is not like the other? So take 30 seconds. I got Fanuel is pointing to, looks like the upper left, I would imagine. Okay, so on the upper left, this is the only one that has the students on technology on a screen, but the lower left also has students using technology, just in a different way. We swing back over to, actually, we'll go counterclockwise this time, why not? If we swing back over to the smaller pictures in the middle, all of these students are using technology. They're just not electronic. They're using some sort of learning tool. Even the one on the lower right, the classic mathematics lecture, right? The sage on the stage. The tool is the chalkboard. In the middle over here, typical hands up, but they're all using some sort of computer tool. So, and then if we go to the upper right, I love this picture because I'm also drawn to this one because this looks like nothing of the others, but these students could be taking an exam. These students could be doing some independent learning. These students could be miserable, right? You could say that for any of the others. The point of this slide is to show that there are different ways, different tools we can use to engage our students. And so I know there's a lot of people out there that really hate Zoom, and I have really come to love Zoom. I absolutely love it. I still love the in-person teaching, there's no question, but there's so much accessibility and versatility that we can use in a hybrid environment or even in a purely online environment when done correctly. So the other thing to mention here is the tool is only as useful or as effective if the teacher knows how to instruct their students how to use that tool. That's an important part of having a good learning experiences. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears for a second and talk about a parable. And I'm going to talk about the parable of the bicycle. And I present this as a case for you to think about those engaged learning spaces before, because it illustrates that there are multiple ways of actually considering how we ride the bicycle. But in this particular case, I'm going to present a typical way of thinking about learning and how I think we actually naturally learn. So this is a typical bicycle that a 2 or 3 year old would own. My son, actually, who's now 12, learned on a bicycle like this, and had a great time. And we don't really often think about it, but I'd like you to think about, how you learn how to ride a bicycle. So many of you, or maybe none of you, are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy in the cognitive domain, which we've been using for years and years and years, essentially says that learning happens in a hierarchical manner. We build upon knowledge. Can you guys see my arrow? Okay. You all see my arrow? Okay. We build upon knowledge. We understand that knowledge. We apply that knowledge. We analyze, we synthesize, and we evaluate. And for the most part, our K through 12 and undergraduate years are spent in the knowledge and comprehension phases. And then as we go into undergraduate professional school, we move into application analysis. And then later, into the synthesis and evaluation. So that's great. And Bloom's taxonomy is fantastic for being able to write learning objectives, which I will go over later. But it has a serious flaw, and that is that it assumes that all learning is hierarchical. And so if you actually learned your bicycle in the way of Bloom's taxonomy, you would have to learn about all of these parts of the bicycle, and then all of these parts of the bicycle, and then all of these parts of the bicycle, without ever getting on the bicycle, right? And my guess is at least 99% of you, if not 100% of you, didn't learn how to ride a bicycle that way. You probably learned just enough to know how to sit on the bicycle, how to pedal on the bicycle, how to steer, and how to stop. That's probably it. It's probably all you needed, right? And at least for me, when my dad taught me how to ride a bicycle, he held on to this handlebar on the seat, let me go, and I felt fully confident that I was completely protected. And then it wasn't until I realized that he was not there anymore that I actually crashed. And at that point, when I made my first major mistake, then I actually got back on the bicycle and learned more about the bicycle in order to not crash the next time, right? But Bloom's taxonomy doesn't teach that way. Bloom's taxonomy assumes that you know everything about the bicycle by the time you are ready to write it. So this is Fink's taxonomy for significant learning. And in the appendix to these slides, there's a reference to what this book looks like, but I highly recommend it. If you are into course design at any level, I really love this taxonomy for thinking. And what he proposed was that on the right in our rosette, we still have to learn the foundational knowledge, the application, and the integration, which basically translates to the facts, how we apply them, and how we integrate them. None of that has changed. But the important parts of learning that we add in that are implicit, the human dimension about learning about oneself in relation to others, caring about the content that you're learning and why it matters in the worldview, and then becoming a lifelong learner can all happen simultaneously. So you don't have to learn everything before you can enjoy all of the other things about learning itself. I can learn how to be a self-directed learner while I'm learning basic knowledge or while I'm applying it. And any combination of these is called significant learning. So now we can actually learn how to ride a bicycle in a holistic way. And when we use the knowledge that we need to further our understanding of how we actually use information, it's a whole nother world. And so I can almost guarantee that most all of you learned how to ride a bicycle this way, where you learn just enough to be able to enjoy it, to be able to get better, made your mistakes, and then learned more about whatever it was that you're trying to learn, in this case, riding a bicycle. Okay, so that gives us hopefully a foundation for two different modes of learning, both of which are correct, both of which have strengths and both of which have weaknesses. But I think the Fink's taxonomy gives us a framework by which we can understand more natural learning. So if the goal then is to develop students into lifelong learners and adaptive experts, and I'm going to define adaptive expertise as an expertise in which you can learn enough information to do well in one scenario, but then apply it to a completely new scenario without any major issues. In other words, you have become an expert in the adaptation of information and knowledge and its application, not in the content. Now, we all need to be content experts too, I understand that, but you can be a content expert and not actually be adaptive, right? You can't be adaptive and not be a content expert as well. So if this is the goal, right, so we'll have to make this big assumption, then we need to approach the learning space differently. We can't have a situation in which our job as teachers is to simply dump information in front of our students, assume that they somehow absorb it, and assume that they somehow can apply it. We actually, as teachers, have a bigger role, and the pandemic has really magnified that. It has magnified the who are really good teachers and who are really not good teachers. And Better Learning Experiences was formed. It was really cultivated over probably at least 10 to 15 years, but the foundation of it was really formed when we realized that the gap between those who could teach effectively to the benefit of their students and those who were really struggling really needed some solutions. And my colleagues and I put together better learning experiences so we could help our colleagues, particularly those from underserved neighborhoods who didn't have the resources to be able to teach effectively. So the first thing we need to think about is what types of learning leads to our higher order thinking. And so we're going to get into this, this concept of inclusivity. And so higher order thinking occurs when a person takes new information and information stored in memory and then interrelates or rearranges that type of that information. Now, I am there unabashed constructivist, and that is one type of that's a type of learning theory where which espouses that all learning comes from building upon prior knowledge. There's all different types of learning theories: cognitivism, behaviorism, connectivism, all sorts of different ones. But I am a constructivist connectivist, and so if you haven't gone into learning theories yet, I highly recommend it because it really gives you a good framework for what you are trying to do in your projects. So every good learning experience then has to have a balance of three major elements. And these elements need to be sensitive to the students who are in your class. So your objectives, your activities, and your assessments are the pillars of every good learning space, not just a course. So that learning space could be learning how to ride a bicycle. It could be sports, it could be music, it could be some sort of skill, right? Our objectives, at least for the clinic, we want our students to be ready. We want them to be content experts. We want them to be adaptive experts. We want the activities for them to be able to learn content and learn application and evaluate data, and to be able to do it beyond that learning space. That's an important aspect of learning. It doesn't do my students any good if I just teach them to do really well on my test, right? I have actually done them a disservice if I do that. But what's really important, and this is where all teachers fail, well, okay, not all, 99.9% is in the assessment. And you may remember an experience where you were in a high school or a college class and you thought you really understood the material. You could do every practice problem. And then you got this exam where you got problems from totally left field. And the professor was asking either totally impossible questions or their questions were unfair or misconstructed. So this is where courses tend to fail, is we've got good objectives, we've got good activities, but how we provide feedback in the form of assessments to our students keeps them guessing as to what they're actually trying to do in the class. And that's a recipe for disaster. In reality, we actually want to get at the secondary levels of this, facilitating learning, coaching students, providing all sorts of feedback, summative, formative, on a test, oral evaluation. You did a great job and here's why. You could have improved on this and here's why. I liked your answer, but can you take me through your thought process of how you got there, whether or not the student got it right or wrong? All sorts of different types of feedback. So in order to give good feedback, in order to have good objectives, good activities, you really have to know your students. And this could vary from semester to semester, year to year, epic to epic, however you want to look at it. My colleague Lauren Sloan at SUNY Delhi does this amazing activity with her class at the beginning of every semester. Now, she is teaching underrepresented minorities for the most part in anatomy and physiology. And she just asks them some simple things. She asks them write their name, what they prefer to be called, because she's trying to understand their identity, their timeline at SUNY Delhi, their anticipated major, what are they looking forward to, what are their concerns. I really like this one. What past instructor helped you learn how to be successful in the classroom? What past instructor did something that didn't help you learn in the classroom? And then I really like these last two questions. What should I know about you that can help me increase your success in this course? And so you can see from day one, the learning space is established as we're in this together, and I'm here to help facilitate your learning. This is not I'll give you an example of the complete opposite. I had a student many years ago who came into my office and said, I've got to take this physics class. I showed up to the first day and I'm going to hate it. I said, why? You love physics. And he said, well, on day one, the teacher said, I really don't want to be here, but I have to fulfill this teaching requirement. So here are all the assignments. And I mean, he was completely unmotivated to do anything in that class, let alone enjoy it. So that is the complete opposite. So you can imagine a learning space, imagine yourself in a learning space in which you feel connected to your teacher and to your other classmates because you are all in a safe space to make mistakes. Going back to the bicycle analogy, how do I learn how to ride a bicycle? I have to make a mistake, right? Should I have turned right or left? If I fell, what made me fall? Should I, how do I press the brake? Is the rear brake or the front brake on the left or on the right? Right? All of these things are mistakes and we need to do them in a safe space. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that just kills learning is when a professor asks a student a question and the student gets it wrong and the professor says, no, that wasn't right. Who's got the right answer? Now, I know we've all been there, but what's the feeling you get, right? The feeling is I'm never answering a question ever again. So how are you as a student ever going to get feedback ever again? But here is the opposite and more insidious problem. Student answers the question right, and the professor says, good job, and they move on. So now all of the other students think, oh, I answered that wrong in my head. I'm not going to answer the question. And the student who got it right doesn't know why they got it right. That's just as bad, right? Because now you're setting up a classroom environment in which nobody knows why they're getting the answers right or wrong. Forget the right or wrong part. There's no understanding of the process. Both are disasters in learning, right? And that, again, it goes back to assessments, being able to carry out assessments correctly is important. Well, imagine if you don't even feel included in your classroom, right? That just magnifies that problem. So let's look at objectives. The future of medical education is under a big magnifying glass right now. We are in uncertain times. We're moving into remote healthcare. That's why, in my opinion, Zoom is the best thing that ever happened to us, because this space is not going away, right? This space is going to help cut costs in some respects, not others, but for the most part, it'll allow accessibility to those who have the technology to be able to access their physician, their healthcare provider. We need to be able to learn how to communicate, i.e. teach in this space. So how do we utilize big data? How do we take into account the emotional impact of wellness and health in general? The pandemic really highlighted that one as well. What is the economic impact of what we're doing? Does everybody need the MRI, or are we okay with the ultrasound? Can we do the ultrasound virtually, right? Or can we just do it the way we did in the old days of just physical exam? All of these things are really into the limelight. So we really need healthcare providers that are adaptive experts, because what we teach them now is not going to be relevant. It used to be said 5 years down the road. It's not going to be relevant tomorrow, right? That's how fast the field is changing. Okay, so when I design a course, I love backwards design. And I'm thinking in my mind, how can I help my students become adaptive experts, even if it's just within the context of the anatomical and physiological sciences, right? Or it could be in the grander context of research or education. So I think of these things. What are my strongest values with regard to what and who I want my medical school graduates to be, or PA students, or insert favorite students right there, right? As they get ready for the next level. And I tell my students all the time, my goal in this course or in this space is not for you to pass my exam. My goal is so that you will be prepared when you get to the next level, right? Or if you want to use a good meme, if I am on the stretcher and I see you in front of me, standing above me, I want to make sure that I will be safe. That's my goal. So what physical, experiential, and human resources do I have available? And this is a tricky one. Not every institution has the available resources, and you have to work with what you've got. What tools do you have? And we're talking about learning tools right now, right? Different types of backwards design is a learning tool. It's a teaching tool. Okay, so I threw in this slide because we did this really quick experiment where we wanted to find out what is the most effective course type of material and teaching pedagogy that our students enjoyed during the pandemic. And so I'm not going to read all the details of the experiment, but the bottom line is that we interviewed students and we wanted to know, were our flipped classroom materials really useful? That was our primary objective. And what came out of that was, well, it depended on how I use them. But what was really more effective was having the TAs, my fourth year medical students, provide Zoom recitation sessions. We couldn't meet in person. So provide these Zoom recitation sessions where they could answer our questions time and time and time again. No matter what we asked about content, what they were really interested in was feedback. And so the thing that I learned from this paper, which we just published in the International Association of Medical Sciences Journal, Medical Science Educator, was that feedback is the most important aspect of the educational space. Now, again, that said, you still have to have a balanced objectives and activities. So no matter how you produce your course materials, whatever you do for your projects, having a good feedback system that allows the learner to understand what they're doing makes a huge difference. So then that leads us to activities. Okay, if we frame our objective for here's who I want my students to be, and know that I want to give them as much feedback as possible so they can become that student, I've got to give them learning activities to get them there. So here is the next part. And so we actually did this experiment at Spectrum Academy in Pleasant Grove, Utah, where we were interested in engagement and brain activation. And we have this fancy little tool called a functional near infrared spectroscopy device. The company Obalab calls them device. I like to call them headbands for obvious reasons, which you'll see here. But what you can see on this tablet is functional activation, which is based off of the oxygenation of the brain cells in that area over time. And red means more oxygen is going to that area. Blue means less oxygen is in that area, okay? So we did this simple experiment. What we did was, these were with students on the autism spectrum. We put them into simulated learning environments within the same groupings. So the first was teacher didactically teaches on the whiteboard and students learn, okay? The next scenario, which you'll see in a second, actually, I'll just go forward so you can see it. The next scenario was teachers engage the students in some sort of interactive engagement process. And then the next one was students teach students or students teach teachers. So they're interacting with one another, but it's not a didactic environment. And so here's a student teaching a teacher, and here's students teaching students. Okay, so all we wanted to find out was, what is the frontal lobe activation, which is an executive system functioning area of the brain? What's its activity during these 4 different activities? And if you're interested in getting the slides from Fanuel, you can actually play the videos, which are cool, and listen to what's going on. Okay, but I'm not going to show that. But I want you to hone in on what's going on down here. Okay, so the teacher's tablet is always on the left. The student's tablet is always on the right. And you'll notice that one student is wearing the headband, and the student who's hiding behind here is not wearing the headband. And here is the bottom line. When the teacher is teaching didactically, that person's frontal lobe activation is very high. And the students is almost 0 in almost every case where we saw this teaching environment. Once the teacher had an invested engagement with the student, notice the student's activation went phoom. Right now, you see more blue here on the teacher. It'll get red eventually, but the teacher's frontal lobe activation and the student's frontal lobe activation were quite high in the engaged environment between teacher and student. Right. Between student and teacher, where the student's teaching the teacher, the frontal lobe activation was sky high. And if you watch this video later, you'll see that this student's brain activation goes from a blue, where he's just sort of going through the motions, to bright red. And when that student reaches that, it goes to bright red when that student realizes, in this case, he made a mistake, right, and corrected it. And that was the same for the student-student. Now, in the student-student interaction, there is no teacher to give them the right answer. But what we found here is that the students' brain activation was above and beyond red, right? That's an exaggeration, but when students identified mistakes and worked together to correct the mistakes, their frontal lobe activation was sky high. When they were just listening to a didactic presentation, there really wasn't much going on up there. So anyway, we found that very, very interesting, because what that told us is we needed to have learning activities where students were safe to make mistakes, identify them, and correct them. That is what is the brain. That's what elicits the most brain activation. So this is Michael Jordan, and he encapsulates everything quite nicely. For those of you who don't know Michael Jordan, he's probably one of the best basketball players of all time. That's arguable. I get that, right? But I love this quote. He said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I have failed over and over again, and that is why I succeed." And I think this quote really encapsulates what kinds of activities we want to have in our learning environment. Okay, so here's another activity, and I'm just going to go over this very, very briefly. Anatomy Academy is a service learning activity in which we wanted to engage preclinical students. So these are pre-professional and professional preclinical students in teaching complex medical information to elementary school kids. Service learning is a requirement of accrediting bodies, and this happens to be the LCME, which is the allopathic accrediting body. And the key to service learning is that not only are students serving the community, having some sort of preparation phase, but they have some sort of reflection phase. So service learning includes the self-assessment. That is what differentiates it from outreach. So here is our service learning. It's called Anatomy Academy, like I said, and it is an engaged classroom environment in which both the paraprofessional teachers and the students are teaching and learning from each other. So let me just show a quick clip of Anatomy Academy, and you can get the idea of how this activity can really elicit some pretty incredible learning.
Anatomy Academy is an outreach research program that we started at UCLA. It is a program where we teach anatomy, physiology, and nutrition to 5th and 6th grade students as a part of an educational intervention against obesity.
There are some really significant benefits of Anatomy Academy. Number one, we see students that are highly engaged, so they're participating, they're contemplating what's being taught to them, and they're taking it in. I love the interaction between the people who are presenting and the students. There's a real positive interaction there.
Students are engaged, they're having fun, and they're learning at the same time. There's an excitement in the room. They're very interested. It's just the best of learning.
And how do you think the mentors are benefiting from this?
Well, I think they're feeling that that kind of surge that comes from giving service. I mean, they see the light come on in the students' eyes, and they're feeling that they're really giving something of their knowledge for the benefit of others. So I think it helps them in terms of, again, that feeling of I'm doing something that benefits someone else, and I can use my knowledge to benefit someone else.
With Anatomy Academy, it's like a great public health intervention because you're teaching all these young kids how to take care of themselves so that they can be healthy in the future and like they don't have to go to the hospital. And another reason is like I'm really interested in the body, and I think it's awesome to teach people about it, and especially kids because they're just so excited, and I love to teach, so that's another reason.
Yeah, the anatomy, nutrition, and physiology, even though that's the main part of the program, what I'm really, really excited about are these relationships that are formed. And the opportunity for students here at BYU and the University of Utah and Utah Valley University to be able to get an opportunity to see if they like this type of interaction. This isn't just about the books, it's not just about the grades, it's about those relationships. That's very, very exciting to me. And I'm glad that we're able to provide this opportunity to everybody.
Okay, so I share that because, let me share my screen again. In that environment, the question I'd like to leave you with is, who is the teacher and who is the learner? We actually have 2 years of data on the kids showing that they improved in their science knowledge without ever feeling like they were in a classroom. That was the most common comment that we got. We have 10 years of data on our mentors showing that Anatomy Academy service learning in general had a significant impact on their professional and personal identity formation. And so you can see that an activity does not have to be one way, right? Okay, so there's some activities. I'm going to finish off with some assessments, and then I'll show you our business model, and we'll end there so I can answer some questions. So the first is, this was developed by Chloe Reed, who is one of my colleagues through Better Learning Experiences, and then also with David Morton, who's also one of my colleagues. So we were really interested in universal design for feedback. And I'm not going to go over all of these, but these are all the different types of typical feedback mechanisms that you can use in your classroom. All of them are great. They're all wonderful. They all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses. And the key here is, in deciding which type of assessment you're going to use, you really have to key in on who you want your students to become and how you want them to show off what they know and what they can apply. So lots of different ways. And you have to get to know your students in order to know what kind of feedback you want to be able to, what kind of assessment and what kind of feedback you want to give to them. So these are some less traditional ones. I love the less traditional ones, particularly creating videos. And one of our colleagues, Steve Oslander, is an expert on video creation for elementary school kids. And you can do it all on Zoom. In fact, he does it all over the world at the same time because of Zoom, or actually I think they use Google Classroom. So lots of different ways to get to assess and provide feedback. So feedback is a whole nother talk, but I do want to emphasize that as you think about how you're going to ask your students to show off what they know and who they become, you need the proper feedback tool, the proper assessment tool to be able to do that. So, okay. So engaged learning and teaching, in summary, means making a connection with your students and having them connect with you, asking questions and being receptive to answers. That safe space to make mistakes, super important. And you can't have a safe space unless it's an inclusive space. Well, it's not that you can't, it's just really hard. So provide feedback to the students, encourage creativity, listen first and speak second. And this is my favorite phrase from Dr. David Morton from University of Utah: teach students how to learn, then get out of their way. And we can't underestimate the power that students have in their own learning process. So how did we get to better learning experiences? With that logic model in mind, we designed a company that we wanted to provide educators a service to help them design, engage, assess, and implement their how to learn in their classroom. And that could be in content, that could be in skills, it could be in mastery, it could be in all sorts of different things. So we want to design compelling learning objectives, engage their learners, gauge their learner understanding, and ensure confidence that they're learning something in that space. So we actually provide, oh, that's weird, I've got weird animation here. We actually provide some foundational direction through white papers, tailored guidance through webinars, and one-on-one consultation for our clients. And these are just some of the topics that we are producing as we go into the different domains of designing, engaging, assessing, and implementing. We have a number of content experts, which you can see here, and you can go to our website, betterlearningexperiences.com, where you can see the different expertise of our of the people in our nonprofit company that can help with all 4 of these types of phases. Now, so I lost my arrow. There we go. One of the things that is important for us is that with the goal of helping our colleagues learn and then apply and then become adaptive experts in their own art, we want to make sure that we provide core topics, these in-hand tools and the resources that they can come back and learn new things from us or from anywhere, really, as they go about their teaching venture. Okay, and here's our website right here. You're welcome to take a look at that. We just officially started in 2021, but like I said, we've been thinking a lot about this for years and years and years. So, okay, so lastly, I just want to acknowledge STEM Advocacy Institute. Thank you very much, Fanuel, and especially Peter, for giving me more work to do. I appreciate it very much. My Better Learning Experiences team, I've mentioned a few people already. Let me just also mention Diane Harnish, who's our business manager, who really helped pull all this together for us. And then everyone who has done Anatomy Academy, thousands of mentors and even more students and coordinators. And then Lauren Sloan, who I quoted earlier. Okay, so this is an appendix, a real appendix, a virtual appendix, which is right here. But this is an appendix of slides that you can take a look at on your own time if you'd like to learn a little bit more about learning theory and course design. Thank you.
Yay. I think I'm seeing some claps out there. Okay, as always, I have a million questions, but I will refrain myself from asking them at the moment, unless no one asks them.
You can't refrain. So. I know you too well.
Perhaps, but I will do so. Questions from the audience in Zoom right now. Feel free to just jump in.
So, really great talk, John, and I've heard it a few times, and I always get something different from it, so I really appreciate that. I'm curious, when you're talking about kind of designing this and specifically kind of getting to know your students, a lot of like the Anatomy Academy stuff, you're kind of one step, if my understanding, one step back from the K-12 students. So when you're saying get to know your students, are you talking about like you and the students that you're sending out, or are you talking about you and the K-12 students, or your medical students or undergrads and the K-12 students?
So, Peter, I couldn't have paid you more to ask that question. So the reason I emphasized when I showed you the Anatomy Academy video, the reason why I emphasized the question for you to think about who is the teacher and who is the student is that when we talk about inclusivity, it is bidirectional. So no matter who the instructor is, whether that's university professor and professional student, or professional student and K through 12 student, or elementary school teacher or secondary teacher and student, or colleagues, could be peers, right? That it doesn't matter. It's not a top down, it's a horizontal. And so when we talk about inclusivity between teachers and students and getting to know, there is a professional bidirectionality to that. I'll give you a good example. So one of my colleagues that I consult, who is in a school in Texas, was really struggling getting to know his students. Now, he identifies as someone who is white. His students are underrepresented minorities. He will admit that he does not understand their life experience. And I said, well, let's dissect this down, right? Where are you from? He says, well, I'm from rural Texas. I said, well, isn't that an underserved area? And he said, yes, it is. And I said, well, don't you have students who are underserved? He says, yes, I do. And so I said, a simple thing would be to say to your students, to be frank, to be vulnerable. Obviously, you have to be professional, but say, I am not a person of color, but I am from an underserved neighborhood. I understand what it's like to be underserved, right? And so he tried that. And to his complete astonishment, he found that many of his students really related well with him, even though they were of different color. And he was so stuck on the color thing, he didn't realize that there are other intersections, other things where they can get to know each other and be inclusive in that way. And that made a huge difference in his learning environment.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Check is in the mail.
Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Okay, so since no one's asking, so Claire.
You all had your chance.
Claire, go ahead. Claire, I'm gonna hold. I'm gonna hold as long as I can.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I am particularly and selfishly interested in the communication kind of that you train or potentially train the students that you work with, and would just love to kind of learn more about how you prep them to go into classrooms, virtual versus and in-person settings.
Sure, in Teaching Anatomy Academy.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't mention this during the pandemic. We had some schools that begged us to teach Anatomy Academy, even though it was virtual, and it was a resounding success. And we actually have data on that. And basically, what it boiled down to again was creating, in this case, a virtual inclusive learning environment. So I have about a 90-minute training at the beginning of the semester for our mentors, and we're calling them mentors. There are paraprofessional students that go into the classroom and teach. And that training includes a lot of time on the learning paradigms and theories that I presented here. It includes a lot about reflection of what made their learning experiences positive ones and which ones were negative ones. We go into a lot of professionalism training, how to work with students physically, psychologically, mentally, how to actually, what it looks like to have an engaged learning space. I actually go into the physicality of what that means. So we try to pair 2 paraprofessionals or 2 mentors per 6 to 8 kids. And most of the kids you saw in the video are like in circles of tables, if you will. And the last thing we ever want are 2 mentors sitting next to each other. We want them actually spread out amongst the kids and to learn how to deal with what I like to call a controlled chaos environment, right? And that I call it controlled chaos because I also train our mentors to set down ground rules with input from the students. So the students are actually defining what the learning space is going to be. And so when the students and the mentors feel like they have established this space, like there's no discipline problems. We have no issues, And it's because, and then of course I train them on the content. The last thing is the content, right? The 90% of Anatomy Academy is learning how to relate with people and to communicate and be inspiring. So it's great that you asked that question, because in our data that Naomi Schmaltz at the University of Indiana School of Medicine has produced is showing that a lot of the people who were mentors, an incredibly high percentage, they describe their professional their professional identity formation as starting with this type of activity. And for some people, it started with Anatomy Academy. Some people it continued with Anatomy Academy, but some people have continued that service for years, the 10 years afterwards, because it became such a big part of how they communicate information, how they relate with patients, how they are empathetic, how they're creative and resilient, all of those things. So surprisingly, it doesn't take a whole lot of training because a lot of the training is on the job. And I give my mentors the space and the freedom to ask questions, but I also have a leadership hierarchy where I've trained what I call coordinators who coordinate the teams of mentors. And so I allow them to be leaders on their own. So, and in fact, I just found out not too long ago that there are Anatomy Academy spots in places I didn't know existed. So, because it's free, go for it, right? I mean, create it on your own. And that's how, again, my objective was to basically change the world one student at a time, and it's happening. So.
Okay, so I resisted until this time. Now it's my time. I am so the Anatomy Academy, to make sure I understand, is one of the program within BLE. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So BLE was actually formed after Anatomy Academy, but we took the service part of Anatomy Academy under the BLE wing because we found that it was a good way to teach teachers how to teach. And so when they saw that as an example, it made a lot of sense. But the academic part of Anatomy Academy is under my academic institution, Boston University.
Okay, and I mentioned that because we have fellows and residents that are designing new initiatives, programming, right? And it's always when you're presenting, sometimes it's like linear, like things are never really like that. It's sometimes it's trial and error. You're trying things, you walked us through the logic model there, it's beautiful now, but I'm sure you went through hell and back as you built this thing, right? For your for the BLE in particular, for the training of the trainers, right? What would you say is the KPI that keeps you awake at night? You say, if this, I'm looking at this needle here, and if it's moving in this direction, we're doing something right. What is that?
What is the indicator?
Yeah, sure.
So I would say the indicator is in those aha moments that where our I call them colleagues, but you could also call them clients, but the people that we're helping provide us feedback and say, I tried that and wow, it was great. Or I tried that and it was a disaster, but then I tried something else. And so when we get that kind of feedback, that is really what motivates us to continue. What the indicator in the opposite direction is where, I'm struggling, I'm using this tool, I'm not getting it. And we have to reframe the paradigm. So a good example would be team-based learning, right? Big hot topic. Everybody loves or hates team-based learning. And the thing about team-based learning is it's a fantastic tool for student engagement and feedback in a simultaneous space. But if you run team-based learning incorrectly, it's the worst experience ever, right? So you have, it's analogous to if you're used to using a hammer and someone gives you a screwdriver and you try to use a screwdriver like a hammer, and then now you blame the screwdriver for being a terrible tool. There's nothing wrong with the screwdriver, right? And so the whole point of better learning experiences is to help our colleagues learn how to use the screwdriver if that's what they want to use, right? So that would be the indicator on the other side.
Yeah, and it's always hard finding these indicators, defining them, and for me as well, I have my own set that keeps me up at night. Pete.
Yeah, so thinking about the better learning experiences program, company
in this case. Yeah.
Okay.
It's company. A nonprofit company.
What's the how does that work financially? Are people bringing you on as a consultant and you are charging a fee and then helping them kind of figure things out? Is that how that business model is working?
Fantastic question. Fenwell, just to make sure, am I okay to go a little over time?
Yeah, you have probably another 3 minutes. Okay, then we're gonna close shop so people can finish their day.
Fantastic. So Peter, we built it as a nonprofit company so that we could minimize the cost to our clients, and our goal is $0. So an organization called Lifeport, which is led by Smart and Bagu in Nigeria, was really interested in our services to help them with their Brain Awareness Week. And so we raised funds. We asked for donations to help fund our time and provide materials and content for him so we could do everything for him and his organization for free. So he opened up our webinar for him to all K through 12 teachers in Nigeria. And so we gave that webinar, and now we've set up a course for them. So we raise funds either through donations in kind, is the big model right now. We have to expand our business model. We're going to go into crowdsourcing, and we're going to go into grant writing. Are the three main pillars for procuring funds to be able to pay for those kinds of activities. So we don't charge clients unless they want to pay us, but nobody wants to pay us. So we're okay with that. So yeah, and actually we're now in the phase where we want to open up for the student side. We're establishing a pathway program. I mean, this. So we're establishing a pathway program to help offset costs for underrepresented minorities so they can go all the way through the pathways. So it's a mentored pathway program for students starting in middle school. And so we're raising funds for that now too.
Yeah, and funding is difficult, right? And for all of us, as you're trying to figure out what makes sense, what can I charge? Can I apply for grants? And then if I apply for grants, do I have the infrastructure to accept grants? right? All these questions come up. And so that's why I love being kind of an SAI where we're thinking about these things and help each other out, and tools, right? Where's the database for grants, right? Potential folk
Very helpful, by the way.
yes, indeed. So with that, guys, this was fantastic, and as always, thank you for tuning in. This will be again stored on the YouTube world domain. You can watch it later, and reach out to Dr. Wisco if you're interested. If you're watching this in the future, get in touch with him, and I think the link will be in the description there to betterlearningexperiences.com. The website is up, right? It's operating.
Oh, yep, it's up.
Perfect. Yep. So if you're interested, if funders in particular, if you're out there, yeah,
we would love to help you sponsor someone who wants to have a better learning space.
Exactly. Now, so with that, please join us for our next set of talks in April, which will be our fellows demo day, or pitch day, actually not demo day, pitch day. So join us for that on April 26th, and